Someone stood up in an audience somewhere and said to you, how do you be successful?
Mm-hmm.
And you said you have to be undeniably good at something.
Well, it really is this. When people ask me, say, how do you make it in show business or whatever? And what I always tell them, I've said it many years, and nobody ever takes note of it because it's not the answer they wanted to hear. What they want to hear is, here's how you get an agent, here's how you write a script, here's how you do this, But I always say, be so good they can't ignore you.
Steve Martin is wrong. They can ignore you. Now, just to be really clear, I think that Steve Martin is a wonderful artist. And he's shown himself to be a wonderful artist across so many medium. As a performer, as a comedian, as a movie actor, as a bluegrass musician, as a novelist, he is the ultimate multi-hyphenate as far as I'm concerned. Really just outstanding work, and everything that he does is quality. I mean, you look at something like The Jerk. I mean, I grew up on The Jerk, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, and a bunch of other movies like that. His 70s and early 80s comedies. They required so much craft. You look at something like The Jerk and you think, oh, that's just a ridiculous movie. And it is a ridiculous movie. But it is so hard to do that kind of comedy, to do it well, to do it so that it elicits laughter. And I don't know of a single person who could ever watch The Jerk and not just be screaming with laughter at all the idiocy of the movie. It's just wonderful. And it goes to show how careful Steve Martin is insofar as his work. It would be wonderful to think that all you need to do is be good at your craft and eventually you will break through. But that's just not true. We wish it were the case, but it's not. I'll tell you from experience that sometimes the best people are ignored. In point of fact, often the best people are ignored. How often do you hear of some novelist, some painter, some great artist who was ignored in their lifetimes, and after the fact, after they were safely dead, all of a sudden everybody declares him this great genius? Yeah? And it happens all the time. Now, few people are fortunate enough to have some sort of fame posthumously. Most of us have whatever fame we have in our lifetimes. And if we don't get famous, well, and I don't mean famous in the ridiculous Kim Kardashian kind of way. I'm talking about being well known within your professional circles, your professional milieu. You see, being good is not enough. It is never enough. What you need is social capital. That's something that Steve Martin, with all due respect to him, I'm not putting him down, but it is something that he is ignoring in this lovely platitude that all you need to be is good and they won't be able to ignore you anymore. They can ignore you. How many times have you seen people who are just not particularly capable at the very top of a corporation? How many times have you seen somebody who is just actively incompetent and yet they are in a position of power? How often have you seen that? I see it all the time. How often have you seen mediocre film directors, mediocre film writers at the top of their field? Look at Zack Snyder, who is, just to give a very concrete example, the man is incompetent, and yet he is leading the DC comic universe, and it's a disaster. All of his movies suck. Yeah? Anybody would have been better than him. He doesn't know how to tell a story. Yeah? All he knows how to do is do these commercial moments of grandiosity, like, ooh, look at this, Superman has arrived. But any kind of story, they're all ridiculous and stupid. He doesn't understand storytelling, and yet he is in charge of a multi-billion-dollar franchise. What does that tell you? The best don't get to the top. No matter how good you may be, you need more. You need social capital. That's what you need. That's what Steve Martin is not mentioning. Now, Steve Martin used his social capital very effectively to go from one medium to another. He started as a stand-up comedian. By definition, a stand-up comedian is in front of people. People saw him. People saw how good he was. They talked about it. This built his reputation. until eventually he was invited to be a comedic movie actor. And he did his comedies, The Jerk, etc. And then he showed that he could do dramatic roles, because his comedic roles, he started doing more straight man roles, like the one with, what's his name, John Candy, right? He was more the straight man. And then eventually transitioned into serious movie roles, like in Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon was not a very good picture, but his performance was very good. Parenthood, another great movie, where he's essentially the straight man, and you see what a good actor he is. Till eventually he did his, I think one of his best performances, if not his best performance, in Shop Girl, based on the novel that he had written. How did he become a novelist? Well, he started by writing for The New Yorker, writing these little talk of the town pieces, writing these short stories. Now, do you think that David Remnick, the editor-in-chief of The New Yorker, you think he didn't know who Steve Martin was? When Steve Martin called him up and said, "Hi, we haven't never spoken before, but my name is Steve Martin, and I was wondering if you could take a look at some of my writing." You think that David Remnick didn't know who he was speaking to? Do you think that David Remnick says, "Steve Martin, never heard of you, go away"? He took the call, he looked at the writing, and yes, Steve Martin's writing was good. But he needed that social capital, that name recognition, that allowed David Remnick to pick up the phone, that allowed him to get David Remnick, rather, to pick up the phone, that allowed Steve Martin the ability to get his pieces in The New Yorker and eventually write a novel, write several novels as a matter of fact, and get them published by reputable publishers. I'm not knocking the man. I'm not putting him down at all. I think he has had a fantastic career, and as far as I'm concerned, I wish him nothing but the best. I wish him a long and prosperous life, because I hope to see more of his great music, his great books, his great performances in film. He hasn't done many performances as of late on film. I wish he'd do more, because he's fantastic. He's a great presence and such a subtle actor. I mean, if you notice that, comedic actors, they really know how to do drama, because, see, timing is everything. And for comedic actors, they really hone their comedic timing that translates so beautifully to dramatic timing. Notice how few dramatic actors can transition to comic actors. But getting sidetracked here, you need social capital. Being good enough is not enough. I wish it were. It would be wonderful if just being good enough were all that mattered. It would be wonderful if all of us walked around with a digital readout on our forehead saying how good we were. 1 to 10 scale. Keep it simple. If we'd walk around and said be like some guy with a 10 on his forehead and say, "Hey, him, he's a 10. He must be great at whatever he's doing." Being whatever. The police are after me, I guess. Anyway, it would be great if just by glancing at somebody's forehead, we knew how good they were. But that is just not the case. We depend on other people to tell us how good somebody is. John Smith, oh yeah, he's a great actor. I saw him the other day. Or John Smith, I haven't seen him, but somebody told me that he's really good, so I guess he must be really good. Let's go see him. And we go to his play, and we go to his movie or whatever, and we say, "Oh yeah, John Smith, he's a pretty good actor." But it depends on what other people are saying. Very rarely do people come up with an independent judgment about something. More often than not, their judgment depends on other people. Look at our president, Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump is an incompetent. He is somebody who is not capable of doing his job as president. I'm in favor of a lot of things that he wants to do, and I thank God that Donald Trump is president and not Hillary Clinton. Not because I have great love for Donald Trump, but because Hillary Clinton would have led us to war. But Donald Trump is not a competent individual. Yet, he was able to parlay people's perceptions of him as being this very successful businessman, and he was able to convince people in Michigan and Wisconsin to vote for him. And he was able to convince people in... Donald J. Trump is not a competent president. He is not. There are tons of people who would be better presidents than him, yet he rose to the position that he currently holds because of the social capital that he had built. He had convinced enough people that he was competent when he is not. It is very clear. I mean, look at the scandals with the James Comey resignation and all the other stuff, the Trump care and all this stuff. He doesn't know what he's doing. And he's not even 6 months into his job and he's already talking about a major shakeup in his cabinet. He's not capable. His presidency is going to be a big disaster, but that's not important. The point I'm trying to make is, see, at the right moment, he was able to convince enough people. He had built up the social capital in order to slide into the position of president. Zack Snyder was able to slide into the position of controlling the DC multi-universe, or whatever the hell that stupid thing is called, because he convinced the right people. These CEOs of these different companies, these incompetent men and women, because, you know, men and women equally incompetent here, okay? Look at, what's her name, Melissa Myers over at Yahoo, an incompetent. But she convinced the right people that she was capable. She had accrued social capital, which she used effectively to get the position that she wanted. It wasn't that she was good. It was that she had convinced enough people that she was good. The truly good people, unfortunately, Steve Martin is wrong. There are so many good people who are ignored. Good people, capable people, people who in certain positions of power with certain works of art, writing, film, what have you, they would be fantastic, they would be the best, and yet they are ignored. You have to, you know, take that as a lesson. You've seen these people who are really, really good, and yet they're ignored. How many writers, they died penniless, alone, and nobody knew their name, and then years later, oh, look at this great writer. He's so good. Yeah, he's dead. Yeah. So you got to keep that in mind, that you have to be good, yes, but you have to be good enough, because they can ignore you. And so your task is to not be ignored.